All right, Mr. Court Reporter, we can go back on the record.
15 seconds.
Sure.
Okay, everything's running now. Thank you.
Okay, we're returning back on the public record from going into confidential session in case number 9509P, which is the Washington Gas Light Company's annual PGA hearing. We'll turn to Mr. Sammartino for the questioning of witness Tumenios.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Tumenios, to tie everything together here, as you explained earlier, you evaluate your supply proposals based on quantities offered, whether the contract is firm or flexible, the price index, and any premiums affecting the price, the delivery location, and the time frequency element. So now that responsibly sourced gas is included in your procurement portfolio, would you agree that the third-party certification is now an additional consideration in Washington Gas's procurement decisions, in addition to those factors you already stated today?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask a few questions about the RSG pilot program. So are you aware that in 2017, the Commission established guidelines for evaluating pilot programs, which include the utility developing clear goals at the beginning of the pilot, evaluation metrics to determine whether the goal was achieved, estimated costs of the pilot, and a public review of pilot results?
I'm not.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I didn't get that. What did you say?
If the witness can answer the question again.
No.
I didn't get. Did you say no or I am?
I said I'm not aware originally, and no the second time.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ms. Tumenios, could you explain the goal of Washington Gas's RSG pilot?
Sure. I think first off, pilot may be a misrepresentation. Proof of concept more accurately defines the goal. Washington Gas intends to be an active participant in the market, evaluating certified gas as it continues to evolve in order to meet our climate goals.
Okay, and were there any additional costs associated with the pilot?
No.
So how would Washington Gas determine whether its RSG pilot or proof of concept, as you say, was successful or not?
Washington Gas needs to continue to be active in this space to understand how the market is evolving. I would say that this proof of concept was a success based on what the company learned as part of the process. And overall, that no incremental costs were passed to customers. We were able to demonstrate emission reduction based on the methane intensity of the producer that we acquired gas from.
Okay, and why was it necessary for Washington Gas to pilot its RSG procurement through its default service?
Certified gas is a natural gas purchase. So by definition, it should flow through the PGC process.
Okay. So thank you for your patience. I just have one final question. So if you could refer to your rebuttal testimony on page 5, starting at line 10. Let me know when you're there.
Can you repeat the page number?
Page 5, starting at line 10.
I'm there.
Okay. So there you quote staff witness Baker's statement in his direct testimony that responsibly sourced gas may be a tool to assist with the state's climate goals, but RSG is a value-added product that is not necessary in the supply or distribution of gas. Do you agree with Mr. Baker's statement?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tumenios. Your Honor, OPC has no further questions, and OPC requests that the documents marked as OPC Exhibit 1 and OPC Exhibit 2 be admitted into the record as evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
OPC Exhibit 1C and 2C are admitted confidentially. Does staff have any questions for Ms. Tumenius?
Yes, we do, Your Honor. Ms. Tumanios, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Tumanios? Oh, thank you. I just wanted, it's the first time I've had the pleasure of chatting with you. I wanted to note in your direct testimony on page 12, you could turn to that page 12, starting at line 20. Let me know when you're there.
Yep.
And there you note that during the final month of the gas review period here, which is September 2020 through August 2021, you began buying that responsibly sourced gas we've been talking about. I'll call it RSG for short. Correct?
Yes.
Now, I want to discuss with you a little more, and Mr. Sarmatino touched on this, and go a little more into the specific standards WGL applies in evaluating the purchase of renewable gas and RNG and RSG and other carbon reduction measures. I just want to briefly touch on a couple of portions of your testimony, then I'll ask the question. In your rebuttal on page 5, starting at line 5, you could turn there. Are you there?
I am.
There you point to Mr. Baker's observation that the commission in its decision, in its review of the gas purchase costs of the gas utility UGI, and I'll quote here, required that UGI justify why it is including RNG in its portfolio, the premium UGI is paying for the RNG relative to other assets in its portfolio, a cost-benefit analysis that it is cheaper for society to incorporate RNG into the company's portfolio relative to other carbon avoidance measures, and any other non-quantitative justification for the inclusion of RNG. And then if you could turn, just continuing on, starting in line 11, here you assert that Mr. Baker, and again, I'm quoting, requests that the commission require Washington Gas in the future to provide the same analysis required for UGI if Washington Gas chooses to enter into any carbon reducing measures as part of the company's gas supply, including both RSG and RNG, if the company seeks to recover the cost of this gas supply from its ratepayers. Now, you then go on page 6, lines 6 through 9. You again refer to Mr. Baker's direct testimony. You say that, and I'm quoting here, my position is that Washington Gas will continue to comply with the PGC statute and demonstrate that the cost of purchased gas are just and reasonable. The economic test offered by staff witness Baker is only one means by which a gas company can comply with the PGC statute. Now, my question is this, is your understanding that the commission requires Washington Gas to buy a specific quantity of RNG or RSG?
No.
And would you agree that one factor in evaluating WGL's carbon reducing actions, including purchase of RSG and RNG, one factor in evaluating these purchases are reasonable, is the cost of these actions as compared to the other carbon reduction actions available to WGL.
Yes,
So it's sort of, you're looking at your portfolio of options. So, and comparative price is really the focus. Is that correct?
it could be, yes.
Now, would you also agree that in evaluating the purchase of RSG and RNG, which, as you know, are chemically, that's natural gas. So you'll be comparing the cost of that to the cost of conventional gas, correct?
Just a clarification, you're switching back and forth between using RSG and RNG, but they are different products. Compositionally, they are different. And so RSG is the same as conventional natural gas. So with regard to your question, an RSG, my answer is yes.
Okay, and again, I didn't mean to delve into chemistry well beyond my purview. Yeah, I was getting in terms of the market. RSG is a gas product. I appreciate your point that it involves different production practices, but to reduce or eliminate methane emissions and that sort of thing. But okay. Now, if you could turn to your direct testimony, page 12, starting at line 23.
Okay.
And continuing on to page 13, line 1, here you say that Washington Gas's pilot purchase of RSG will result in a 4,609 ton reduction in carbon dioxide, correct?
Correct.
Now, in evaluating whether to buy RNG and RSG, do you rely on any economic model to monetize the environmental attributes of the RNG and the RSG?
There was no economic model used in assessing this particular purchase.
Are those models available if you wanted to use them?
What is a model? Please define a model.
Okay. You may be aware that the Environmental Protection Agency has developed, I think they call it the social cost of carbon. So they have a formula based on a whole bunch of assumptions, but it's the only one out there. Everyone seems to rely on it as the definitive model where there's a carbon reduction. They can actually associate a dollar benefit to that in doing a cost benefit analysis. So my question is that something that Washington Gas has access to that kind of models? Are they aware of them in terms of in the future evaluating purchases of RSG and RNG?
Yes.
Okay, and indeed we've already discussed that at least the relative price of RNG and RSG as compared to conventional gas is a factor, not the only factor, but a factor in evaluating the extent to which you rely on the RNG and RSG, correct?
Yes.
Now, in your rebuttal on page 5, line 10, just want to focus at the end of that sentence, you refer to non-quantitative justification for the inclusion of RNG. Now, and that's the commission's language in the UGI decision. Are there any non-quantitative criteria that Washington Gas is relying on and expects to rely on in evaluating RNG and RSG as compared to alternative sources of gas?
Not currently, but certainly there's benefits that we would take into consideration.
Now, when you do that, would those be in the RFP, for example, do you post the criteria that you'll use in evaluating the competing bids?
To be clear, which criteria are you referencing? The non.
I'm-
Go ahead.
Yes, specifically, if you did rely on a non-quantitative criteria.
We haven't relied on non-quantitative criteria to date.
Okay, and do you anticipate, is that something that might develop with respect to specifically talking about the RNG or RSG? Is that something currently being contemplated?
Your Honor, I'd like to object to that question. This is a look at the PGA going back to the period ended August 2021. I think Mr. Counsel is asking for asking our witness about things that will happen in the future, and I think it's beyond the scope of this.
Your Honor, I think that, if I may, the purpose of the question is both looking backwards and forward for us to better understand the criteria Washington Gas will be using in evaluating RNG and RSG. It looks backwards in that we all agree that during the review period here, the utility did buy RSG. And it's clear, they made it quite clear they will continue to look at it as part of their clean gas portfolio. So I think it's relevant both in terms of what's happened and what's coming up.
I'm going to allow the questions. Staff made a recommendation in its testimony, and the witness responded to the recommendation in her testimony, and the question is right on point. Go ahead, Mr. Albert.
Mr. Manios, do you want me to repeat that?
Yes, please.
Sure. Would you be relying, well, I'm forgetting myself what the, can we go, I forgot myself what the question was at this point. Could the reporter read that back? I don't recall what I said, frankly.
I'm sorry, I cannot do that because I'm using the recording equipment, can't play it back through the unit.
Okay, thank you. We were talking about the okay, I'll move on. Well, okay, I'm sorry. I guess I was talking about the non-quantitative criteria. I was asking would Washington Gas be using this going forward? That elicited the objection from Ms. Ahmed, and Your Honor decided we can go ahead with the question. So again, I'll repeat, going forward, do you anticipate using any non-quantitative standards when you evaluate the bids, and will they be included in the RFP proposals?
Based on what I know now, there is no non-quantitative data to include in an RFP proposal. As the market continues to develop, we may get new information that may require including non-quantitative data in the RFP process or to bring, in front of staff.
Okay, and one final question. We've talked a bit about index prices, and in confidential documents, you disclosed the competing bids and you explained how they're priced not so much in dollars and cents as much as a discount or premium off an index, correct?
Yes.
The fact that a bid, let's just say a bid is NYMEX minus 10%, NYMEX referring to the leading gas exchange, the New York Mercantile Exchange. One bid is NYMEX minus 10 cents. In and of itself, that bid may or may not be a competitive bid, correct? The mere fact that it's a discount off an index is only relevant as it compares to other bids. For example, if there's a NYMEX minus 10-cent bid and the next one is NYMEX minus 20 cents, you would agree with me that the NYMEX minus 20 cents, that higher discount of 20 cents as compared to 10 cents makes the 20-cent discount a lower price bid. Is that correct?
I agree.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Ms. Ahmed, any questions based off the questions of OPC or staff?
No, I don't at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Tamanios, the RSG gas purchase that we're talking about was you made a distinction between a 3-month pilot and a 3-month proof of concept. Why did you make that distinction today?
I made that distinction based on the criteria that OPC had laid out for the criteria for evaluating a pilot program. This particular transaction didn't fall into that kind of assessment.
How did WGL evaluate its RSG purchase?
The RSG purchase followed our exact same purchasing process that we follow for any other natural gas.
Okay. Tell me if I'm, just check my math, tell me if I'm right, that this was a purchase that, it was a 3-month purchase. It was made during the period at issue in this case, this year. But that the gas supply received by WGL was only 1 month, and the remaining 2 months will be in next year's PGA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, there was on page 13 of your direct testimony, you talk about an additional contract for RNG. What is the time frame for that?
I don't know the RNG contract off the top of my head.
Okay. But am I right to say that that's a transportation contract as much as it is a purchase gas contract?
Yes.
Oh, the witnesses, I mean, the attorneys have been referring to your rebuttal testimony at page 5, where you talk about the recommendation by staff witness Baker on what type of reporting they're requesting for future RSG purchases. It seems that the recommendation is multifaceted. There's 4 or 5 different requirements there. And I see in your testimony that you're objecting to that type of reporting requirement. Are there specific aspects of that reporting requirement that you're objecting to, or just in general?
I think there's two things that I want to clarify. One is that RNG and RSG are different products and should be assessed differently. Of the multifaceted recommendation that staff provides, I feel that the existing statute already addresses one of his requests. I feel that the request for a premium to be broken out separately could have limits to how this stuff is priced in the future. And I also feel that the premium that was mentioned, as mentioned earlier, is relevant to a particular location and may not be relevant in telling the full story of the cost of gas.
Okay, you state that the UGI transaction is not comparable to the transaction of WGL that we're talking about. Can you expand on that a little bit, please?
Yes, I'm not as an expert on the UGI transaction. However, it is a renewable natural gas transaction, and Washington Gas's transaction is a certified gas transaction. The constituents of the product are different, and RNG's transaction also includes investment in infrastructure to be able to build out. It's a more complicated transaction that requires more justification compared to a certified gas product that we're assessing during this period.
So, but it sounds to me like you're objecting to both staff's suggested requirements for RNG and also for RSG. Is that right?
That's correct.
I don't have any further questions. Miss Ahmed, do you have any questions based off of my questions?
I do not, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Tamanios, for your testimony today. And do you have any other witnesses, Ms. Ahmed?
We do not. Washington Gas does not have any other witnesses.
Okay. Washington Gas rests. Does OPC have any witnesses?
No, OPC has no witnesses today, Your Honor.
Okay. As is my usual practice, I will turn to you at some point later, Mr. Sammartino, to ask what OPC's position is, but I'll wait until after staff goes. Mr. Albert, do you have a witness?
Thank you, Your Honor. Staff does have two witnesses. The two witnesses who did file testimony, Benjamin Baker and Dave Valcarengi. We'd like to start with Ben Baker, please.
Okay, before you do that, Mr. Albert, do you have an attestation?
Yes, Your Honor. Well, I attest that the witness is in a separate room and will not be in communication with any other person during his testimony.
Okay, is that for both your witnesses?
That's with both, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Baker, will you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Baker, can you describe your title and your job responsibilities at the commission?
Yes, I am Director of the Gas, Water, and Telecommunications Division. I oversee the filings and analysis for those three subject matters, mostly economic related and rate setting related for those three topics at the commission.
Your Honor, we would like to mark as Staff Exhibit 1, Mr. Baker's direct testimony. And there's a public version, and so we would ask that Exhibit 1C would be the confidential version.
Staff 1 and 1C are marked.
Now, Mr. Baker, did you prepare this direct testimony?
Yes,
And this was filed by the staff on February 22nd, 2022, correct?
yes.
Do you have any revisions to this testimony?
Only one in the header of both the public and confidential. I had stated case number 9602. That should be case number 9509P. With that, that's my only correction.
Okay, Your Honor, let me ask you, you did file rebuttal testimony as well, Mr. Baker?
No,
I'm sorry, you did not. Okay, thank you. Your Honor, we would ask that Mr. Baker's direct testimony which is marked as Staff Exhibit 1, be introduced into the record.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
Staff Exhibits 1 and 1C are admitted into the administrative record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Staff has one brief rejoinder question, if we may, from Mr. Baker.
Any objection?
Your Honor, based on the rejoinder, no objection, but based on the rejoinder, if there is need for Ms. Tamanios to have a response or reply, would that be possible?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Albert.
Thank you. And we had pre-cleared this with Washington Gas, and they did at that time ask if they would have if we would be okay with them responding to the live rejoinder. We say we were fine with it.
I understand that, but it's outside of the procedural schedule and it was not addressed with me, but I'm going to let you go forward at this point, Mr. Albert.
Yes, no disrespect intended. We do not intend, I was not suggesting that our agreement of the parties would determine the issue. It was just I wanted to come into the hearing having worked it out with the parties to then present it to Your Honor. Can you refer Mr. Baker to Mr. Manios's rebuttal testimony starting at page 5, line 23?
yes,
And look, going forward, really to page 6, line 20. Just to summarize here, Mr. Manios disagrees with your recommendation to impose on Washington Gas the conditions that the commission imposed on UGI for evaluating utilities purchase of RNG or RSG, or more generically, any carbon reducing measure. Did Washington Gas provide any criteria to be used in evaluating Washington Gas's purchases of RNG and RSG going forward?
Not that I can tell. The company on page 6, lines 16 through 20 simply states that the company will assess future opportunities to meet the climate goals and meet the company's obligation for procurement of gas at just and reasonable rates, and that be dealt with on a case by, and recommends that in future opportunities be assessed in currently approved processes, i.e. evaluation of individual contracts as they are proposed in the future. And I'm okay evaluating it on an individual case by case in the future, but I believe that we should have a structure, and the structure that we have proposed, which is basically a comparison of the products, the premium products, which I would call the carbon reducing products versus the non-carbon reducing products, a comparison of what other opportunities the company has to reduce carbon versus the cost of measures that they're taking now, and then any other criteria they wish to evaluate, which is kind of that catch-all, any other non-evaluative criteria be introduced at that time. But I believe that taking that as a whole, then we can more fairly evaluate these products that aren't completely necessary for the delivery of gas at this time, because there is no mandate to use them. And so I do recognize the state has a carbon reduction goal. And therefore we should be considering things like this, but I believe that you need to look at it holistically. Thank you.
That's all we have, Your Honor, for this witness. Thank you.
I'm going to turn to Office of People's Counsel next.
Your Honor, Office of People's Counsel has no questions for this witness.
Okay, and WGL.
I have a couple of short questions. Good morning, Mr. Baker. I don't believe we've met. I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions about this test that we've been referring to that staff had recommended for the UGI, which the commission accepted, and that you have also proposed for Washington Gas. In the UGI proceeding, case number 9516D, I believe, did staff give the commission other economic analysis or tests to consider?
No, I would view that recommendation and this as a framework for an economic test. An economic test is cost benefit. I would say this is all just a cost benefit analysis, and so this is just saying a framework of what should be included in that. So I'm saying that there should be 3 different parts to that, and frankly, if the company wanted to add additional measures in the future to supplement that, I think that would be more than fine. But I view this more as a framework than an actual test. This is more laying the groundwork for doing the test.
Mr. Baker, I think you anticipated my next question, which was going to be, would you agree that there may be other types of analysis or components to this analysis that could be included to determine the to meet the requirement for carbon reduction per the statute?
Yes, and I would, if the company wanted to introduce those at that time or in the future, I think that would be very acceptable as well.
I don't have any other questions for this witness. Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you.
Mr. Albert, do you have any questions based on the questions of OPC or the company?
No, I do not, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Baker, a lot of information was given to you by the company in rebuttal. With regards to the hexane contract, what is your current position on that?
I'm fine with it for this year.
Okay, and all right. Are there any other issues currently, based on your current position, regarding WGL's practices in procuring and purchasing gas products?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, do their procurement practices in this proceeding appear to be competitive and reasonable?
Yes.
Can you tell us what would be involved in your recommendation for a cost benefit analysis?
Yes. Well, Yes, I think I've laid that out in my recommendation on the last page of my direct testimony. And then if you want me to give more detail, I'm happy to do that. So on page 9 of my direct testimony, I state that I believe when we're looking at these carbon reduction measures that the company would take when purchasing its gas, they should, one, justify why it's including them in the portfolio, identify the premium, and then provide a cost benefit analysis that is cheaper for society to incorporate. I'm stating here the RNG, but I would also say RSG and any other carbon reduction measures into the portfolio relative to other carbon avoidance measures and any other non-quantitative justification. So I guess I view it as a 3-part analysis. One, what's the price of this product that you're purchasing relative to your other, I'll just call them generic natural gas purchases. 2, you could choose to pursue other carbon reducing measures. So where does this fall on the scale of, I guess, the cost of reducing of carbon using, I guess, using RSG or RNG versus other methods? And then 3, as I was telling the company in my responses, there could be non-quantitative ones that haven't been thought of, or there could be other adders to how you would value this gas in terms of saying this is a benefit. And I think that those should also be included within that analysis. So it's really just saying from a framework perspective, what's the cost of the natural gas versus of the carbon reducing gas versus the non-carbon reducing gas, and what is the cost of these carbon reduction measures versus other carbon reduction measures.
I guess my question is more on the benefit side. Can you give me a list of things that should be provided and compared by the company on the benefit side?
Yeah. So the number one would be, and I think this is really the bet, is what is the cost, what is the benefit to society of reducing greenhouse gas emissions? And so I think Mr. Alba referred to this. There's different organizations out there that come up with the value of a reduced emissions from a product. And so I would envision that would be a benefit here. And so what is that coming out? There could be public health benefits by which you'd have to, when you're coming up with your price, that value of that avoided greenhouse gas, you'd have to determine, is it already included in there? But those kinds of benefits could include, is it reducing public health, or sorry, no, improving public health, and I guess those would be a couple. I would have to think more about what others would be. But the main benefit of this gas, really the only benefit of this gas right now that I can think of, is you're avoiding carbon.
Have you seen a similar cost benefit analysis or RNG and RSG in other cases in here or in other jurisdictions?
So I haven't looked at other jurisdictions, and so far not in this. This year is when I've started to see the introduction of these measures, and so that's why we started to include. Our UGI was where it was first noticed, and so that's where we made that recommendation to say, let's start evaluating this in the future. And so that, yes.
Do you have an idea of what the cost of such a cost benefit analysis would be?
I do not, but I would be a little surprised if there was a significant cost, and assume that you have an in-house economics team that would be looking at the cost benefit analysis. Washington Gas participates in our Empower programs, where they're required to do cost benefit analyses to justify their programs. So I don't know how this would be really much different than what they're going to be doing over in the Empower programs. I would not imagine it to be as intense as what they're required to do there.
Ms. Tamanios suggests that each utility should be able to use its own discretion to justify the benefits of RSG and RNG for its own customers and to justify the costs. What is your reaction to that?
I'm okay with that, I think, and that's where I was when I was responding to Ms. Amahed. My apologies. Anyways, where I was saying, look, this is a framework. I'm saying, at a minimum, we need to know what is the cost of this gas versus the other gas in the portfolio, and what is the cost of this measure versus other carbon reducing measures. But if the company wants to include anything else in that analysis, I'm more than happy to consider it and think that we should probably consider it, because there could be multiple parts to that. This is just saying here's a framework in which to operate.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Albert, do you have any questions based off of my questions?
One question, Your Honor. Mr. Baker, the judge made reference to the fact that Washington Gas seemed to suggest that it should be each utility should be able to develop its own standard for evaluating the reasonableness of a purchase of these alternative products, the carbon reduction process products such as RNG and RSG. Are there advantages or disadvantages of a generic process using a uniform standard across all utilities, as opposed to what Washington Gas seems to be suggesting would be deferring to the individual model that each utility develops for itself?
I mean, advantage would be ease of, for staff. I mean, from staff's perspective, would be an ease of evaluation across the different utilities. But at the same time, it's not saying that I think there is a benefit to adding or to allowing the utilities to consider additional criteria when doing this, because maybe there's something we haven't thought of ourselves. But over time, as this comes together and as more companies start to do this, I think hopefully we start to converge towards something where it is, similar across with maybe a couple small nuances. But especially in the beginning, as we start going down this road of how are we going to meet the state's greenhouse gas goals, and as the gas utilities start to figure that out, I do think that giving them flexibility is important. I'm just trying to lay a groundwork here, but I do think there is a benefit for our evaluation purposes across all these cases that we deal with over this 3 or 4 month period, that there is some uniformity in them.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, for your testimony today. You can be excused. Does staff have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Staff's second and final witness is David Valcarengi.
Mr. Valcarengi, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Your witness, Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Valcarengi, can you describe your job duties at the commission?
I am the assistant director in the accounting division. I'm generally involved with the development of revenue requirements and verifying a host of financial items pertaining to utilities in the state of Maryland.
And did you prepare direct testimony in this proceeding that was filed on February 22nd, 2022?
I did.
Do you have any revisions or corrections to that testimony?
I have one correction to make. On the cover page of my testimony, where it highlights the case number, where it reads 001, that should be deleted. So it should read 9509 parentheses P close paren.
And that would be your only correction, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Your Honor, we would ask that Mr. Valcarengi's direct testimony be marked as Staff Exhibit 2.
Staff Exhibit 2 is marked. Mr. Valcarengi, on the official file version, I don't see that error. So I'm not sure if that's just a different version, but if that correction is there, we'll be sure to make it, but I don't see it on the official version, just so you know. Go ahead, Mr. Albert.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would move to introduce into the record Mr. Valcarengi's direct testimony, that is Staff Exhibit number 2.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection, Your Honor.
Staff Exhibit 2 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. And now we would present Mr. Valcarengi for cross-examination.
Office of People's Counsel?
No questions for this witness, Your Honor.
And the company?
I do not have any questions for Mr. Valcarengi. Thank you.
Just a couple of quick questions, Mr. Valcarengi. On page 5 of your testimony, you give what a bill impact would be. Tell me if I'm correct, but that's the average residential sales customer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Your Honor.
And then on page 6 of your testimony, you say you reviewed the customer bills and determined that WGA accurately applied the PGC rates, and that includes the ACA factor and the FCA factor, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. Those are just two little things I needed to get straight in my mind. I appreciate it. Mr. Albert, do you have any questions based off of my questions?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Valcarengi. You can be excused. Mr. Sammartino, what is Office of People's Counsel position on this matter?
So OPC agrees with staff's proposed criteria for evaluating RSG procurements. As to the reasonableness of Washington Gas's procurement practices for the period under review and the accuracy of the ACA factor calculation, OPC has no objections.
And what is OPC's position on the controversy in future reporting requirements for special purchases of gas as testified by staff and also by the company?
OPC would prefer that the commission have a standard groundwork criteria, but OPC does welcome any additional factors or considerations that the company would provide to aid the commission's evaluation of their procurements.
Okay, thank you. Does any party have any other matters that we need to take up this morning?
Well, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay,
Staff has nothing.
okay. Thank you for your appearances this morning. The matter can be concluded and we can go off the record.
Off the record, Your Honor. Thank you.